everyone, welcome back to another installment of our Week Time virtual series. We are gonna wait a few minutes before we get started to see if people give everybody a chance to tune in. We are out right now. Again, my name is Clara Zubrick with Angela Underwood, and you're tuning in to our first Tea Time Talk. Again, this is part of our virtual summertime series content we're trying to bring to you to provide you with a little bit of education and knowledge about the resources at Weeks Bay Reserve and also what we do here. Angela and I work with the education team at the reserve, and we are joined today by Eric Brunden, who is our stewardship coordinator, and we were going to talk a little bit today about some of the ways we manage our lands. Eric kind of is responsible for doing that here at the reserve in coordination with everybody else. And so with that, I think we're going to give everybody just a few more seconds to join. Pull up your drink of choice. We've got some sweet tea out here to enjoy on this beautiful day, and we hope you'll enjoy the science lesson we're bringing to you this afternoon.
It's a little bit of a hot day today, so we have our sun hats on,
Yes.
trying to stay cool out here. Eric, tell us a little bit about, you're called the stewardship coordinator for the reserve. What does that mean?
Well, one of my primary jobs here is to manage the land that the reserve holds. And by manage is to decide what actions we need to take to improve or maintain the existing ecosystems and habitats that we have here at the reserve.
Cool. And how much land does the reserve have?
Well, counting even the water bodies, we have about somewhere between 9,000 and 9,500 acres right now.
Oh,
so
that's a lot.
it's a significant amount of territory to cover.
And what habitats does that include?
Well, like I mentioned briefly, it includes some of our water bottoms, but the terrestrial habitats, anywhere from these pine flatwoods to going down into bay galls and pitcher plant bogs and a little small areas of uplands here and there along our parcels.
So speaking of pine habitats, when I look around, I see a lot of pine out here, but it looks like you had a wildfire. What happened out here?
It does look like we had a wildfire, but this was actually part of a prescribed burn. And why don't we walk over and take a little better look here? And as you see, as the camera pans around here, we had a good healthy burn here, but this was on purpose. We had partners from the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources here in Alabama come down and help us burn this approximately 2 weeks ago. And we do that for numerous reasons, partially to get rid of some of the fuel that was just built up in these areas, because we have a housing community over here to the other side of us, and also for ecological reasons.
So Eric, when you talk about restoring the habitat, what did it look like before this was property of Weeks Bay?
Well, I've kind of, by looking through records and land records and doing a little historical ecology background of this particular tract, we learned quite a bit. We learned that at one point there was quite a bit of agricultural activity, there were some grazing activities, and really interesting, if we can pan over here, is we find pines that look like this. This is part of a pine that has what we call a cat face on it. And these cat faces, you see this is kind of what forms the cat face. These were slashed into there to collect the resins from the pine in what was called the naval stores industry. And probably mostly turpentine was extracted from these woods. So we know that there was an active turpentine component from these very woods, because this came from there as well as this cup here. This is a Pringle cup, which is where the tars and resins would collect in here, and they'd go distill them and make turpentine and pitch and other extractants from the pine. So we know at one time this naval stores industry was happening. Turpentine was collected. We know that part of this was agriculturally modified, and I think while we're here and walking around, we'll go ahead and swing around on this other side here. And the tract of land we are on is adjacent to the Weeks Bay Visitor Center, which, for those of you that have been to the Visitor Center, you might have walked this very trail. This is part of our nature trail that leads from the bay back to the Visitor Center. And you've probably crossed this ditch here that's full of water. This place was heavily modified hydrologically to drain water. We're trying to correct that over time by damming up the ditches and restore some of the hydrology here. this fire was meant to reduce the understory, to get more sunlight to the ground as it would have been prior to all these activities. In the South, it's really a story of fire when you're dealing with maintaining woods like this.
I mean, that's really interesting. Fire to me seems a little scary. Is it dangerous when you're out here burning?
Well, before we burn, we make very good plans. It's called a prescription. We determine ahead of time the best conditions before we burn. And if those conditions aren't met, which include smoke's going to react when we start on fire, how the smoke lifts up into the air and gets out of the way, the fuel load that we have, the fuel moisture, the direction of the wind, the humidity, all these factors are written in a prescription, and we don't start the fire until all those conditions are met. So you try to keep it as safe and predictable as possible. And when we burn here, we have a lot of folks here come down to help, and we're as careful as you can possibly be with it. This tract of land happens to be really nice because the bay is right there. We're on the west side of Weeks Bay, so on that side we're pretty safe. It can't go too far. But we do have housing developments. We do have a hot to make sure that the smoke lifts and goes the direction we want it to go and gets out of there. That's probably our biggest hazard is smoke.
So now that we've burned this tract of land, Eric, what type of vegetation specifically, are there any particular plants we're looking to possibly come back up as we have burned some of the understory and cleared it out to allow more sunlight?
We have. Part of figuring out what we should do management-wise is looking at the history, as I've alluded to a little bit, but also looking at the soil types we have here, the existing flora and fauna. And based on all this information put together, we predict we're going to get a really nice bog back here, a pitcher plant bog, carnivorous bog, over time. The soils that are back here are the same soils as existing bogs that we have that have been maintained over time a little better. So we expect that community of plants to come back and the associated fauna. But that'll never happen if the sunlight and we don't get rid of some of the shading back here and thin things out a little bit.
So I heard you mention associated fauna, so we're talking about the wildlife we would see in this
Correct.
habitat. What happens to that wildlife during a prescribed fire?
Well, most of these organisms, this is a fire community. Historically, both naturally, quote unquote, naturally set fires, lightning strikes, and people. Ever since people have come to this area, native first peoples have used fire in these types of habitats, and it helps increase the forage. So animals, they'll just disperse, or they have mechanisms of burrow. They'll just get out of the way. And the forage that will come back actually improves it for birds and for even mammals. It just really helps create a situation where they have places to live and eat, in simple terms.
So it's improving the habitat for those rare plants we're hoping to see pop up, but also for the wildlife themselves.
Exactly. And another reason we're going to get a fairly decent bog over time here is where we maintain, like this nature trail that we're standing on right now, and we have fire breaks put in, we see bog associated plants come up because it's a little clearer here. We've knocked over some of the canopy, we've gotten rid of some of the competition, and we might be able to even spot a few along here if we want to walk along the edge here.
Sure.
Okay, let's take a look. I see a real obvious one from over here, which is right, the ones Angela's pointing at here. Common name bog button or a hat pin. We've seen sundews through here. I'm not saying we can find one right at the moment.
I've seen those before when I've been walking at our pitcher plant bog that has the boardwalk around it.
Correct. And this place, we just did a fire, so it's a little hard to find things right now. But I think if we come back in a little while, we will see all this, and it will come up.
Well, I was just going to say, if you're watching us today, we really value questions. So if anybody has questions, we'd love to hear from you. You can type them in right now, or if you watch this later, please type them in the comments for us so we can get you. And let me ask our cameraman, have you seen any questions come in so far as we've been out here?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay. Well, please We want to ask you to join us for the rest of the summer with our virtual series that we're doing. We have things for all ages this summer. And I wanted to ask Eric as we close up, do you think it would be possible for us to come out again, say, what do you think, 2 months or 3 months, and just see how everything's progressing here?
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to come back here early fall.
Okay.
You know, at the end of summer, early fall time, because this is going to green up rapidly. And yeah, we should walk right through this burned area and see what we find. I think it'll be very interesting for everybody, and hopefully we'll see what we're expecting to see, or at least, you know, heading in that direction. Because that's it, we're trying to reintroduce these, really a disturbance, fire, the natural fire regime, and it's not going to be a miracle, one burn and we're done, but over time we're going to see this slowly move to a more bog-like condition. And I should mention that I forgot to mention earlier is this is not going to be a small bog if what we think happens. It's like 100-some acres for Alabama's a considerable chunk, and that's embedded within a greater like 350-acre parcel. So, you know, compared to out west, 350 acres might not seem like much, but on the side of Weeks Bay, that's a good parcel of land, and 100 or so acres of pitcher plant bog restored would be just fantastic.
Well, that's really exciting, and
Sanford asks if you will have another video when everything is growing back.
Absolutely, we will. And part of our burn here too is to monitor, and we have a team called Gulf Corps that comes out and helps us, and we have monitoring stations where we take photographs, and we also take other measurements of the forest structure. And so not just burn it and just wait, we kind of record what we can within the time frame we have so we can actually have a value to these changes over time.
And we definitely will try to come back with that video following up, but also we definitely want to invite you. The trails are open, and we've got posted signs directing you for the flow. So come out yourself if you live locally as well, and try and make some of those observations yourself and see what you can find and observe out here.
So Eric, we want to thank you for being with us today on our Tea Time Talk.
You're welcome.
And we hope that you all had a little bit of a break from your day, and please join us again 2 weeks from now for our next Tea Time Talk.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.